Chapter 1: The Return. I never thought I'd find myself back here, in the old house where my brother and I grew up. The creak of the front porch, the scent of pine that lingered in the air, and the familiar hum of cicadas in the evening felt like echoes from another life. Yet, here I was, standing on the doorstep, gripping the worn brass handle with a mix of hesitation and longing. "Emma," his voice called from inside, deep and steady, just as I remembered. I stepped in, the warmth of the place wrapping around me like an old quilt. The living room was just as we'd left it years ago, plush sofas in muted earth tones, shelves lined with books we never got around to reading, and the faint smell of cedar and coffee that always lingered. "Hey, James," I replied, offering a tentative smile. He looked at me with those thoughtful blue eyes, older now but still carrying the same quiet kindness. "I was starting to think you wouldn't come back." I shrugged, dropping my bag near the staircase. "You know me. Always running." James chuckled, the sound low and familiar. "Yeah, well, you're here now." The truth was, I hadn't planned on coming back. Not after our parents passed, not after life pulled me in a dozen different directions. But something about his voice over the phone last week, soft yet insistent, told me I needed to. We fell into an easy rhythm over the next few days. Mornings were spent on the back porch, sipping coffee as the mist lifted from the fields. Afternoons drifted by in quiet companionship, memories weaving their way into our conversations like threads in an old tapestry. "Do you remember the summer we built that treehouse?" I asked one afternoon, stirring a pot of soup in the kitchen. James leaned against the counter, a fond smile tugging at his lips. "You mean the summer you supervised while I did all the work?" I laughed, the sound feeling foreign yet welcome. "You were always better with tools." He shrugged. "You had the ideas. I just made them real." The easy banter reminded me of who we used to be, two halves of the same whole, inseparable despite our differences. But somewhere along the way, life had wedged itself between us, scattering us like leaves in the wind. One evening, as I sat flipping through old photo albums, James brought in a tray of tea, setting it down with a thoughtful expression. "Do you regret leaving?" he asked quietly, taking a seat beside me. I traced a finger over a faded picture of us as kids, knee-deep in mud, grinning from ear to ear. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I had to go, you know. To figure things out." James nodded. "I get it. I always wondered if you'd find your way back." One afternoon, as I sorted through old boxes in the attic, I stumbled upon a stack of letters I had written but never sent. Letters filled with words I was too afraid to say. Regrets. Apologies. Hopes. I carried them downstairs, placing them on the coffee table between us. James eyed them curiously before picking one up. "You kept these?" he asked, his voice laced with surprise. I nodded, feeling my cheeks flush. "I guess." I didn't know how to say everything out loud. He unfolded one and read in silence, his expression softening with each line. When he finished, he looked at me, eyes brimming with understanding. "Emma," he said gently, "we all get lost sometimes. But we always find our way back." In that moment, something shifted between us, a bridge rebuilt, a connection restored. And for the first time in years, I felt whole again. Over the following days, we found comfort in the small things, sharing morning walks, tending to the overgrown garden, and sitting in silence as the wind whispered through the trees. With every moment, I felt the pieces of myself falling back into place. One rainy afternoon, James brought out an old guitar, strumming softly as I listened, letting the music wash over me. "You used to sing along," he said with a smile. I chuckled. "I was terrible." "You were you," he replied. And that was enough. Standing by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I knew that coming back had been the right choice. We had grown, changed, but the core of us remained the same, woven together by love, respect, and an unbreakable bond. "Stay a little longer." James asked softly. I smiled, resting my head on his shoulder. Yeah. I think I will. The quiet echoes of home had called me back, and this time, I was ready to listen.